You will lose jobs. You will find it harder to keep the ones you actually have. And you will fail that exam. You will screw up that relationship. And when a real crisis hits you, your ability to think clearly, to solve the problem, to stay calm, to stay composed, will all be gone. You think that this sounds harsh? Good. What I'm about to show you is actually harsher. This isn't me trying to scare you off or anything like that. It's me showing you what's already happening. Because scrolling isn't just wasting your time. It's dismantling you very quietly. And most people won't realize it until the damage is actually done. So the way I see it, there are 4 major impacts we're going to talk about today. Each an increasing order of damage to you and me personally. I would dread the last more than anything else. But it's as they say, save the best for the last. Or in this case, save the worst for the last. So let's jump right in. Number 1, it's making you dumber. I want to start with the most uncomfortable one right off the bat. So your scrolling is genuinely measurably affecting your ability to think. Here's what's happening. Every time you open TikTok or Instagram or YouTube Shorts, your brain gets a little hit of dopamine, a reward, and your brain, being the incredibly adaptive organ that it is, starts to learn. Short input and instant reward over and over and over again, 1,000 times a day. And guess what? Over weeks, over months, over years, it basically rewires your brain, rewires your threshold for stimulation. Your brain basically starts to expect instant payoff right off the bat. Constant novelty and anything that doesn't deliver that kind of instant gratification immediately gets filtered out as boring. For example, this video. So the book you used to love reading, now you can get past 3 pages. Or the long form video you bookmarked about 3 weeks back, I'm sure you can get past 30 seconds of it. Or you're constantly jumping because you want to get to the point. More relatably, that conversation where someone is explaining something complex, something which involves a lot of brain power, you're probably zoned out already. So this isn't laziness, it's actually a neurological pattern. Your attention span has been trained by none other than your own hand to reject depth. And depth is honestly where all the good stuff lives. Learning, creativity, conversations, problem solving, building relationship, all of it quite literally requires focus and depth. And sustained focus is exactly what scrolling erodes. And don't believe me, don't take my word for it. Here's the data that puts things into perspective. According to research done by Gloria Mark, a professor of informatics at UC Irvine, states the average attention span on a screen dropped from 103 seconds between 2004 and 2023. Yep, 103 seconds in just a decade's time. And studies from 2024 found that people who regularly multitask across different social platforms underperform by 20% on attention-based tasks compared to those who don't. So we're not just distracted, we're becoming measurably less capable. And here's what you can actually do about all this. Behavioral scientists call this friction. And it's one of the most well-studied or well-supported interventions in habit research. The idea is quite simple. Automatic behavior runs on zero resistance. The moment you add even a small obstacle, your brain is forced to make a conscious decision, a conscious choice towards whatever you're doing. This is instead of you having a reflex reaction. I want you to check out the video mentioned on top somewhere over here, or is linked in the description for those of you who can find it, where I get into the science-based techniques to actually further reduce your screen time. But anyways, back to what I was saying, fixing your focus is just a part of it because while your attention was being eroded, something else was quietly brewing in the background, disappearing too. Something most people don't talk about or actually don't realize until the hour actually hits. So let's get into number 2. It's erasing your personality. This is the one I find most unsettling, and I almost never hear anyone talk about it or even acknowledge it for that matter. Think about the last time someone asked you, what have you been into lately? And what did you say? Think about that for just a second. Because here's what I've noticed both in myself and in people around me. When you consume content constantly, you stop generating thoughts and start recycling them. Now, what do I mean by that? You see a take online, you half absorb it, and 2 days later, it feels like it's your own opinion. It feels like that's your identity. You watch a video about minimalism and suddenly you think you're a minimalist. You binge stoicism content and suddenly you think you're Aurelius. And don't get me wrong, none of that is inherently bad. Influence is how we grow. It's understood. I get that. But there's a subtle difference. There's a difference between being shaped by something you've genuinely sat with, something that you've genuinely fought with, imbibed it, wrestled with, and given it an actual thought, and then made it your own, versus just being a surface that reflects whatever the algorithm throws at you this week. There's a huge difference, and I want you to think about that for a second. Scrolling keeps you in permanent consumption mode, and permanent consumption mode means you never have space to just think, to be bored, to wonder about something and sit with discomfort of not knowing what the answer is, at least not immediately. I want you to consider this. The average person now is exposed to 5,000 pieces of content every single day, up from around 1,400 in 2012. That's more than triple the informational noise you're being hit with every single day of your lives, compared to what you were getting hit over a decade ago. And research on short-form video consumption explicitly shows that exposure to it before studying reduces students' reading ability or attention span by up to 31%. So essentially what's happening with all of this is we're not just consuming more, but we're also becoming less capable and less deliberate in what we're actually doing that's in front of us. And understanding that truly matters. Boredom used to be a birthplace of some original thought processes. However, now the second you feel bored, you feel that urge, you feel that need, you feel the need to reach for your phone and hand that moment out to an algorithm. So that potentially generative, the creative moment, right out the window, straight to the algorithm, the moment has passed. And now, the result, people incredibly informed on surface level takes but have very little original perspective. People who can tell you what everyone else is thinking, but struggle to tell you what they truly think. Is that who you really want to be? Someone who's completely unoriginal and always on surface level? I don't know about you, but I don't want to be that. And here's the fix for this one, and it starts with something that feels almost too simple to follow. It's a sin not to do it, honestly. So, I want you to rebuild your boredom tolerance. Very deliberately, very carefully. What I want you to do is, I need you to sit with your boredom. And I know it sounds counterintuitive at first, but the more you try to practice this, the better you're gonna get at having more original thoughts come out of you. Well, think of me as a Morty from the future and just believe me. And look, if what I'm saying is somehow hitting home right now, do me a huge favor and hit that subscribe button. I put out videos every week on similar topics, exactly like this one. You know, how to understand your own habits, know your environment is shaping your behavior, yada, yada, yada. So I guess it keeps me motivated to keep going and putting out more content like this. So back to what I was saying. But even as you reclaim your mind, there's a third thing that's happening. Again, there's a third thing happening in the background, brewing very silently, something, feel every single day, but probably don't pay enough attention to it, probably because you've not been given that perspective or shown that perspective until now. So let's get into number 3. Number 3, it's destroying your mental health. I want to be as direct as I possibly can and not clinical, so take me with a grain of salt. If you've been feeling more anxious lately, more restless, more beat down, more irritable, harder to satisfy yourself, your scrolling habit is almost certainly making it worse. Trust me. Maybe I'm going to take a stretch here and leap. Maybe it's even causing it, and here's why. Social media is an anxiety machine. It's made you to feel like you're always missing out on something, like everyone else has figured something out that you really haven't. Like you're behind, like your life is slightly, just slightly less than it should be. All this facade dream that you're being sold. Every time you scroll, you're running a subconscious comparison engine. His body, her relationship, their apartment at 24, that person's job at 25. It gets tiring. And most of the time, you don't even realize you're doing this, but it just settles in as this low hum of inadequacy back in your mind. It's running in the background constantly over and over again. And maybe you don't realize it, but it does tire you. The algorithm that figured out a long time ago that fear and anger are the most engagement-worthy emotions a human can possibly feel at any given moment. Extremes, right? Those are particularly the ones you need to look out for. It feeds you those endlessly over and over again. So you log on to relax and you walk away tense. You realize this? You scroll to feel connected and you end up feeling all the more alone. I'm sure you can relate to some of this, if not the first two. The numbers back this up. You don't have to take my word for it again. A 2024 report by the American Psychological Association flagged social media addiction as a growing public health issue. And research consistently links heavy social media use with significantly higher rates of anxiety, depression, and you probably named the ill effects, you're probably having that. Particularly in people under the age of 35. And one study, to take it further, found that 61% of social media users aged between 18 and 34 report experiencing what researchers call scroll fatigue, where it's a persistent state of mental exhaustion directly tied to their usage habits. And here's the brutal part. The sad part about all this is the dopamine loop means that the very thing making you feel bad is also the thing that you reach out for when you actually do feel bad. It's a trap. Very, very well designed, well orchestrated, very profitable trap, should I say. Your mental health is not very different or separate from your phone addiction or your phone habits. They are deeply, directly linked. And the longer you keep feeding the machine, the louder that inadequacy gets, the louder the background noise gets, eventually leading to all sorts of health concerns. But here's where science gives us something to feed on, something genuinely useful, at least in my head it's useful. Researchers at the University of Pennsylvania ran a controlled study where participants limited their social media usage to just 30 minutes a day across a 3-week window. The result? Guess what happened? Significantly low levels of loneliness and depression compared to the group that used it freely. What does this tell you? I'm sure it should paint a picture in your minds. So they didn't ask them to quit entirely. 30 minutes a day, that's all it was asked. So schedule it. Pick one window, lunch, evenings, whatever works for you, whatever floats your boat. Open the app, use them to your heart's wish, and intentionally close them out after. The difference between scrolling that controls you and scrolling you control is almost entirely about intentionality. Same behavior, but completely different outcomes. However, and this is the most important, all of that, the cognitive decline, the identity erosion, the anxiety, as damaging as they are, they're still mostly internal. But there's one consequence that doesn't stay internal, but that it extends outside of you. One that starts to ripple outward. This one, for a lot of people, is the hardest to hear. Let's jump into number 4. As I said, I'm gonna save the worst for the last, because it's just not about you anymore. There are other people in your life, people who you love, people who love you, your friends, your family, whomever it is, people who genuinely want to connect with you. And the problem is you are physically present with them, but you're mentally somewhere else entirely. I'm sure you know the feeling. You're at dinner, phone's on the table, someone starts talking, you're half listening, half waiting for a pause so you can check that notification that just popped up on your phone. Or something more relatable, you're lying in bed next to your partner and you're both on your phones in 2 completely separate digital worlds, 3 centimeters apart, yet completely different worlds that you guys are living in. I'm sure this is quite relatable. And here's a more subtler one, if for those of you who don't have a partner. You're with a friend and they say something genuinely funny, and instead of just laughing and, being in the moment, absorbing it, you're quickly pulling out your phone, or your first instinct is to pull your phone out and start filming it, to share it. And as if the experience doesn't count unless strangers online have some sort of approval rating on you or have validated it. Scrolling is basically training you to be a passive observer of your own life. And the data is quite stark on this. You don't, again, have to take my word for it. Research from UCLA found that when teenagers have a higher number of likes on social media, the reward centers of their brain is as lit up as if they were to eat a bar of chocolate or winning money, perhaps. So what I understand is we've literally trained ourselves to crave digital approval over real human connections. And I don't know about you, I think it's definitely costing us. Studies constantly show that higher social media use correlates with increased feelings of anxiety, depression, and other genuine health concerns. Even as we become more digitally connected than ever, we are left with feeling more alone than ever as well, simultaneously. And the people closest to you, I'm sure they start noticing. They might not say it out loud, they might not confront you, but they genuinely feel it. I know my friends know when I'm multitasking, when I'm not fully present with them. They feel the divided attention. You probably don't realize it, but they do. And they feel that slight impatience when a conversation doesn't move as fast as a feed does for you, and you kind of rush to complete it. All this has damaging effects on your relationships. Relationships basically survive on presence, real undivided phone face down presence. And this is becoming increasingly rare, is what I feel, which means the people who do have this ability to pay more attention and be more present in a situation are becoming increasingly more valuable, increasingly better commodities for this world. The question is whether you're one of them. And this one, to me, has the most straightforward fix of all. But it requires, obviously, for you to be honest with yourself and commit to the process of actually getting off of social media for a little bit. I'm saying replace the reward. Don't just remove the behavior, because obviously your brain isn't going to stop wanting dopamine hits, and that's just not how biology works. However, I'm saying take a step back, realize it for what it is, and replace it with something that makes more meaningful sense. So instead of trying to take it away all at once, I would say nudge it, redirect it. The most effective substitute for scrolling are activities that kind of feed a more slower, a more nuanced, a more sustained kind of dopamine into your stream. Could be activities like exercise, creative work, reading, genuine conversations, making something with your 2 bare hands, are some of the things that I can think of right off the bat. These don't spike and crash like what feed does. They build, they sustain, and over time, they genuinely help your brain recalibrate to, prefer them over any sort of quick dopamine hits. And this is what identity-based habit research is really about. You're not trying to force yourself to stop being someone who craves for their phones or craves for instant gratification, you're gradually becoming someone who doesn't need to and is okay with that slow gradual release of dopamine into your stream. And the relationships in your life, the ones that deserve your full undivided attention, are generally going to start seeing that difference. Proof is always in the pudding, right? So here's what I want you to walk away with, right? This isn't about willpower. This most certainly is not about being weak or lacking some sort of self-discipline. The platforms you're using are built by some of the smartest engineers out there in the world, with one and only one singular goal: to keep you on the platform as long as possible. So don't beat yourself too much. You're not necessarily failing, you're just playing a rigged game. But knowing that the game is rigged, that's the first move. That's your unfair advantage. Because you can change a pattern that you haven't seen. And clearly, now that you've seen it, I think you can take that step forward. 4 consequences, 4 fixes. You don't have to do all of them at once, but at least pick the one that most resonated with you, something that you felt kind of touched a nerve, I would say, and start there. That's all. So I guess if you enjoyed this one, comment on what you thought about it, and I'll see you in the next one.